All right, so get going here. Okay, a little bit about eBECS. First of all, we are 100.
Or we can't see your PowerPoint slides.
Oh, thank you. That's why you're there, right?
That's right.
Let's make sure I get the right screen here. Screen. Thanks, Charlotte. I think the automation on these slides is messing me up a bit as well. Yeah, okay.
All right, we're in business. We're on your intro slide.
Okay, cool. Okay, so as I was saying, we here at Microsoft, at eBECS, are 100% focused on the Microsoft stack. We work with ERP, CRM, and business intelligence, and we've recently acquired a nav practice. So we have a whole suite of Microsoft products here that we consult with and services that we can provide for them across all platforms. We've also recently expanded our offerings into the Azure world and managed services, so we can help you out in that regard as well. And we focus on global solutions for small and medium businesses. You can see here over on the left, we've won a number of awards. We've been Reseller of the Year the last 5 of 6 years. The year that we didn't get that, actually, we were Global Partner of the Year. We are also a member of the Inner Circle, which is a pretty elite group of people, only 60 partners around the world. It's the top 1% of Microsoft partners. So that's a big kudos for us. And we have the AMR certifications you can see here in discrete manufacturing and professional services. Right. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm a senior consultant here at eBECS in North America, based out of Atlanta. I have 20 years experience in the industry, mostly with manufacturing and small, medium, and large size industries. So I've worked across a whole range of businesses. I've spent the last 5 years working extensively with Microsoft Dynamics AX2012 and doing both project management and consulting, primarily in the trade and logistics areas. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to start with procurement categories. I'll talk a little bit about the features and capabilities and what a procurement category can do for you. We'll walk through how you would go about creating a category and setting that up within AX. A lot of what I'm going to do today is actually in the system, a 2012 R3 environment. I'll demonstrate that setup of the procurement categories and show you how that's done, both the mandatory and the optional settings that you would do. Then we'll move into the purchase requisition itself and how you use that. I'm sure most people are familiar with purchase requisitions, but we'll cover a bit about how those can be used in conjunction with your categories. We'll show the setup. There's a few basic setups required for purchase requisitions. We'll talk about that, and I'll show you how you use purchase requisition both within the AX client and also within Enterprise Portal. And when we do that part of it, you'll see how some of the things we set up in regards to the procurement categories come into play and where you see them within the client and within Enterprise Portal. So without further ado, procurement categories themselves, the features, how we set that up, and a demonstration of that. So one of the key benefits of a procurement category hierarchy is that it allows your users to purchase goods that don't necessarily need to be an item in your system. So these are the goods that maybe that aren't part of your production system or don't go into a bill of materials. A lot of companies use it for their consumables, health, safety, training. So things that you don't necessarily want to create a release product for, and that gives the users the flexibility to specify a product, and then the procurement category can drive the controls of the purchasing and can drive where the ledger postings go. With a procurement category, you have the ability to create one manually, or you can import it from an industry standard list. You see I've listed a few here. These might be familiar to you. Or you could do a combination of both of those. You could bring in a part of an industry standard list and also amend it, add to it, delete bits and pieces. So you can make your own hierarchy that suits your business or parts of your business. The category hierarchy also combines with the other features of the system, particularly the purchasing policies and a procurement catalog if you want to use that, if you're going to be using the enterprise portal. So when you combine a procurement category hierarchy with these other features, it gives you a whole bunch of flexibility in how you control what users can do and what sort of things are required and not required in your system based on what category is being used. You can also set up your general ledger postings, so when your purchase order that comes from the requisition gets received or invoiced, things like that, you can drive where those postings go on a category basis. So there's lots of flexibility, lots of capabilities with procurement category hierarchies. A little bit more about the capabilities here, starting over here with the purchasing policy rules, and we're going to go kind of clockwise around this little wheel here. So once you've set up your procurement category hierarchy, the policy rules allow you to control what users can purchase by category, and you can even set up an organizational hierarchy that's specific to certain users within your company, and then control what that set of users is able to purchase. So lots of combined flexibility in the rules. You can set up the 2- or 3-way invoice matching policy by category, and you can control whether users can purchase from vendors who are approved or maybe just preferred, or maybe preferred instead of just approved. So you can designate vendors into an approved or preferred category within the hierarchy, and then the purchasing policy rules define which of those that they can use for that category. Under products and attributes, you can set up products to, you can define products per category. Now a specific release item product in your system can only be assigned to a single procurement category, but having done so, you can define within the system certain product attributes, and that will allow you to group those products by those categories. You can organize them in Enterprise Portal. That kind of gets into using the catalog a bit, and you can apply attributes to the products by category. Now these features are particularly suited to using the Procurement Catalog, which I'll go into a bit today, but there is a whole other webinar on that as well if you're interested in how you would do that. And the catalog is primarily focused on users in Enterprise Portal. So ledger posting profile, as I mentioned previously, drive your GL postings by category, and also, of course, then report against the costs by category. Vendors, similarly, like you do with products, you can assign vendors to procurement categories, so you can then you can give them the approved or preferred status. And then within the client, if you want to search on vendors, there's a vendor search feature in the vendors grid list. You can pull them out based on procurement category and find them, and based upon their various statuses. So that's another cool feature of the category under vendors. And then finally here, under the Procurement Catalog, now Procurement Catalog is an optional thing, but if your users are going to be buying things using, basically generating purchase requisitions from Enterprise Portal, the catalog is a really useful feature because it allows you to make a hierarchical view in Enterprise Portal. It allows you to put pictures of your items on there. It allows users to search for products by these attributes, and it just gives them an interface that's much more user-friendly, and and you build a purchase requisition basically using a shopping cart kind of a feature like people are used to on the web generally. So that's a really useful thing, and the nice thing about using a catalog and having people put the purchase requisitions in through Enterprise Portal is that only requires a self-service license, which is the cheapest of the Microsoft licenses. So if you have people whose only need in AX is to raise purchase requisitions, set that up, have them access through EP, and you minimize your costs there from a license perspective. Okay, so to set up your procurement category, this is the flow of all the things to do, generally in this order. It's not 100% order dependent here, but generally this is the way I like to set it up. You'll note that there's 4 here that are optional. I'll show you a little bit about doing them even though they are optional because they do provide extra features. But if you're trying to set up the hierarchy, there are just a few basic steps to do, as a bare minimum. Okay. So the first thing what we have to do is we have to create the hierarchy itself, and there are a number of different types of hierarchies within the systems, not just a procurement hierarchy, but there's a sales hierarchy, a retail one. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So what we're talking about here is creating a hierarchy, and then we assign it to the type of a procurement category hierarchy. So I'll go ahead and just jump to the system now, and we'll just show how we do that within AX. So I'm here in my 2012 R3 environment. Now, to create a hierarchy to begin with, you actually are not in procurement and sourcing. You actually navigate to product information management. So all hierarchies, all category hierarchies are set up here. Even though your hierarchy might not necessarily be related to products, like I said, you can buy without selecting an actual product. It's still set here under product information management. You can see here I have a number of different hierarchies. Like I said, there's one's here for product configuration, there's some for sales and different things like that. The one that I'm going to be working with is the procurement one here. You can just create one new, like I said, from start, and it will give you a blank one, but I think it's easier to demonstrate this with one that's already been created. And this is the one that comes standard in your AX demo environment with a few modifications I've made, of course. So here on the left, what you see is the graphical representation of the hierarchy, and of course you can use the little plus buttons and expand them out as you see fit. There can be any number of levels here. I've only got it going down 2 or 3 levels, but you can have it as deep as you want depending upon the category structure you want to create. You can create nodes at the top. To create a node, of course, just like other features within AX, you would just select the node that you're interested in here and do new category node, and it makes the new category under the one that's selected. So of course, if I wanted one at the same level as hand power tool rental, I would have selected equipment rentals, new category node, like that. Okay, so that's as simple as it is, just to add or to delete a category node. If you want to leave one in, but it's no longer required. If things have been, if transactions have been made up on it before in the past, or maybe you're just setting things up, you might want it just to be inactive for now so that users can't use it. So you have the inactivate button. You see I've done that with the payroll one here. I can do that with rent. So like it says here, if you inactivate it, you can't assign it to records, but any history remains. So you can go ahead, deactivate it there. You've got your historical data, so you've got that capability to deactivate them, at least for the time being, and reactivate if you want. Okay, if you were to import from one of those standard industry lists, this is your import feature up here. You can import them from a file, and you can attach any sort of attachments like you do generally within AX Anywhere to that particular part of the hierarchy. Now for each node within the hierarchy, there's a number of different settings you set up. So what I recommend doing when you're creating a hierarchy or getting it sorted out to start with is the first thing to do is probably easiest is just to go through and make the structure look like you want it to. Give it a name, give the different ones a name, but work on getting the hierarchy structure like you want, and then maybe go through it as a second pass and set up all these characteristics. So if I look over here, I'm going to use my computers as the example here. Over here on the right, we've got our name. We've got it defined as whether or not this is currently active. You can see it's active because it doesn't have my little stop sign there. And description and friendly name. Friendly name is the name that's going to go ahead and show up in Enterprise Portal if you're using that one. I can define category attributes, and you can see for the computers category, I've got a warranty attribute defined, and if I had any attributes defined for office machines, I would also be picking that up because I've got this little box ticked here. So you can define an attribute for the category, and then when we actually get into configuring this procurement hierarchy, we can define values for this. So we're going to just give it an attribute now. You can see here, if I add another one, there's a whole bunch of attributes already existing in this system having to do with different kinds of characteristics of either a product or a category. You can, you can add to or modify this list as you want. So I can add an attribute to this category, and then when I'm configuring the procurement category in the next steps, I can assign the values to this. So I'm going to say it's a warranty now. It has that attribute, but the length of the warranty will configure in the next steps. If your company works with commodity codes, there's a number of industry standard commodity codes for different types of products. That's where you go ahead and add them in here. I've not set anything up. I've not yet had a customer who uses commodity codes, but if you do, it's very easy to go ahead and set them up here against the category. You also have what's called a category page. Now this is basically the splash screen that shows in the corner of Enterprise Portal. When somebody's looking at the computers category in Enterprise Portal, this is the information they're going to see. So you can add any number of pages here. So you'll see I've got one called justification, and if I edit it here in HTML, you'll see here, I've just got a simple page that says here, if choosing a computer not consistent with company guidelines, justification is required. So, you can put pictures in here, you can do it in HTML code, you can do it in normal, you can preview it. So if you have something you need to tell your users when they're working within a particular category, you set that all up here, preview it, make sure you're happy with it, save it, and that shows up in Enterprise Portal when viewing that category. And we'll see that when we get into the creation of a purchase requisition. Okay, and then if you use projects within your system, then you need to go ahead and assign a project category to the category as well. You will get errors in the system if you're trying to purchase against this category within a project and there is no project category assigned. So I've just used a default one I've called Proj Item, and within a project category, it also helps with your financial postings in that regard as well. So if you're familiar with projects, you need to make sure that you're using a project category within your category here. If you don't use projects in the system, you can leave that blank. Okay, so that's setting up the hierarchy itself. Okay, so having set up the hierarchy itself, then you go ahead and associate the type to it. And you can see here, I've gone ahead and associated for my hierarchy. I've been working with procurement office supplies. I've given it a type of procurement category hierarchy. Now you can only have one procurement category hierarchy in your system. So if I wanted to create another one, I would have to give this another category type before I made that one the procurement category hierarchy. All right, so that's how we go ahead and we set up and go ahead and create the hierarchy and assign it to the type. So we've done these bits and pieces here. Next, we have to go ahead and configure the hierarchy. This is where we add our products and their attributes, our vendors, set up some stuff about evaluating vendors if we care to do so, sales tax, the category attribute values. That's, for example, like I showed you before, where we had warranty, this is where we give it a value, assign those category pages we created, and view our commodity codes. So I'll just show you all of that within the system. It's a bit easier to follow in that regard. Okay, so and this is where we do navigate back to procurement and sourcing. So having given it the procurement category hierarchy type, it now is available here in the setup of procurement and sourcing under procurement categories. So you can see it just opens directly here because there is only one. And again, we get the same hierarchy we saw in product information management. We see the two that are deactivated. Now if you're in here working to configure it and you decide, oh, I need to change to this structure, you can just edit it from here, and that opens the edit form that we were just using in product information management. Okay, so I'll select computers again. It's my friendly little category. You see a lot of this stuff is now grayed out because they are only editable in the product information management section. So you get them here for reference, but they're not editable. In the product section, this is where we define our products by category. Now, if you've worked with released products before in your system, you know you can also make that assignment within the released product. There's a button on the action pane that lets you do that. And if you've done that, then they show up in this list. But if you want to, you might find it's easier to just add them here, because the nice thing about adding them here is you can go and you can take and select, you know, a slew of different products, do the select, and then just add them in one quick whack. Well, if you do it in release products, you have to highlight each product, and it's a, you know, it's a 3 or 4 button press operation. So this is much quicker to add your products to that category. So now when the users are searching by a category or looking at that category in Enterprise Portal and computers, they see this whole range of items. Some of them don't quite make sense. We're going to take our baseball kit out and our cricket kit. Okay, we'll remove those. So you can add and delete products here within your hierarchy. All right, so for all of these products, we also have product attributes. And this is that same list. If I try and add one here, I'll get that same list of attributes you saw when I was putting a category attribute in when I built the hierarchy. So again, you can have all sorts of different types, and these can be added to, you know, if you want to on your own, different types of attributes that you want to add and allow your users to filter and search on for that set of products. So you could just, again, select a number of different ones, and you could select them in here and add them. In my case, I've just added 2 product attributes. I've got HDMI port and drive capacity. So again, when users are looking to buy a computer, they can search on these 2. They can search and, I mean, not search, but filter on these two attributes. I've also ticked, you'll see I've also inherited an attribute from the parent category. If I select office machines, you see I have an attribute called brand for office machines. So by ticking that box here, all computers in my hierarchy have an HDMI port, a drive capacity, and a brand attribute. And I'll just show you very quickly. So having said that computers have that kind of attribute, what you would need to do to give the values to your various computers is to go into your release product and assign the values. Let me just show you that real quick. So if I just, let's see, like C0002, if I look at C2 here, so here is where I go ahead and set up my attributes. So this is where I give it the values, right? So I said that brand is one of the ones, remember that it got inherited from the parent category. Drive capacity, well, it's a keyboard, so there's no capacity. And HDMI port, let's say maybe we've got a keyboard with an HDMI port. Okay, so it's within the, having given the, you know, given this category of products, these attributes in the hierarchy, the actual values that apply to that release product are set up here for the release product. Okay, so that's where you define your product attributes. Similarly to products, I can assign vendors here to this category, and this allows you to search for vendors by category, which can be a really useful feature. Now, vendors can exist, unlike products, vendors can exist in multiple categories. Now, these products, once I've got this product here in computers, I cannot have it exist in another category. One of the key features of a catalog is that there's a way around that, so you can see, for example, your mouse in computers and maybe accessories as well. So catalogs, you might check that webinar out if you're interested. It talks a bit more about that and gives you more flexibility. But under vendors here, so I've added my vendors, and for each vendor I've got two types of status, whether it's approved, just approved, or of course the higher status of preferred. And then this doesn't really on its own do anything here, but when you use it in conjunction with the purchasing policy, that's where the power of this comes through, because you can say, for example, in computers that perhaps you want a certain group of people to only be able to purchase from the preferred vendors. Maybe another group of people can use all of them. So you've got all sorts of ways to, you know, to control and limit that purchasing. I'll show you, I'll talk about the evaluation button in just a second here. So what you've got here under valuation groups is you can define the need to evaluate your vendors. This is a pretty complex topic. I'm not really going to go into the details, but you can say, for example, here you can see that I've got the ability to rate my vendor on delivery, price, and quality, these three things. So having said that the vendors and computers are rated on these three, under evaluation here, this is where somebody would go ahead and rate a vendor. So having given the category its evaluation group, the ratings are assigned then up here under vendors. And again, then you can use the criteria when you're searching for vendors. And I'll just show you really quickly here. If we look at all vendors, and then under the vendor search here, this is where you can search by procurement category and their evaluation criteria here. So if you've got a whole lot of vendors and a lot of different criteria set up, that's a useful feature, and that's why you might want to use that. Okay. So questionnaires. You can also set up a questionnaire for a vendor, for a category here. And again, this is another whole realm of topics where you've got these, you can set up pretty detailed evaluation questionnaires. But if you've set up a questionnaire and activated it within the purchasing policies, you can actually require your users to fill out a questionnaire before they can submit their purchase requisitions. I've not got mine set up that way just because it becomes very cumbersome, but you can set that up if there are maybe particular vendors or categories that you need to do that for. Item sales tax group. So this is just the sales tax group that applies to all items and non-item purchases within that group. Here's where we run across our category attribute values. Remember we said there was a category attribute called warranty. Get my screen a bit bigger here. And so here's where I assign the value. Go ahead and say, these are my pick list of things. 1 year warranty. Our category page. Now this is that category page we configured within when we were setting up the hierarchy. I don't have any ability to change it here. It's just showing it to us for informational purposes. And similarly under commodity codes, if I'd set up commodity codes, I see them here, again, not editable, but visible just for your reference. All right, so that is configuring the procurement hierarchy, okay? All those different bits and pieces. Again, a lot of them are optional, but the more you use, the more flexible or the more control you have depending upon kind of how you want to use those fields. The next step along our process is to create a procurement catalog. Again, this is an optional step, but again, for using the category hierarchy in Enterprise Portal, this is a really neat feature. And then I said there's another long hour webinar on that. So if I go to procurement and sourcing and I look here under catalogs, under common catalogs, procurement catalogs, this is where I would configure the catalog itself. And the thing about the catalog is it can come in it can be created directly from your procurement hierarchy, and it can exactly reflect your procurement hierarchy. Or again, you can build it out uniquely as well, or you can do a combination of the two things. So this is in large part my procurement hierarchy, and it's similar to the red stop sign where we disabled them when we first built the category. These are not inactivating them, but they are disabling them from showing up in Enterprise Portal. So I can set them up here and they're disabled. So this is disabled in the catalog. So the users, for example, can still order against these categories in the client, but you will not see them any longer in Enterprise Portal. So you get different functionality between the Enterprise Portal and the client through the controls by setting up this catalog. This electrical services one here, this is one I've manually added to this catalog. It does not exist in the procurement category hierarchy. It only exists in the catalog. And this too, under the products, this is where I have the ability to go ahead and add a product that already exists. So you remember before I was working with C0002, our keyboard. Like I said, it can only exist in one procurement category. But when you're talking about the catalog, I'm able to put that in two places in the catalog so the users can see it under staplers. Not making much sense there, but you can see it also under the computers. All right, so that gives you additional flexibility that you might not have within just the procurement category hierarchy. The other thing is you can go ahead and for a given category, you can either use the text that was set up for the procurement category hierarchy, or you can define your own, maybe more user-friendly, less cryptic text to show on Enterprise Portal. So you've got controls there to allow you to do that. Another neat feature here, so we have filter ranges that you can set up. So remember we have our drive capacity and HDMI ports that we configured when we configured the hierarchy. So now what I can do here is I can actually set up defined filter ranges that just show up as buttons in Enterprise Portal. So I can say, just say we have maybe, I'm on HDMI ports. It doesn't really make sense to have 100 HDMI ports. So we can say you've got a range of less than 2, and then maybe we have a range of 2 to 4, you know, like this. So you can set up these different filter ranges, and people can just click on them and it will filter your products by those attributes at the click of a button within Enterprise Portal. And then we also have a price range filter. So if you want to be able to give the users the ability just to filter out by different price ranges in a similar fashion to how I did the filter range before, you can go ahead and add different monetary price ranges that allow users to click a button and filter the list of products that are showing up in that category in Enterprise Portal. We'll look at this in Enterprise Portal when we get to creating the purchase requisitions, and it helps make it a little bit more clear. So once you've done that and you've created your catalog, you can publish your catalog, and also then if you're using products within your catalog, you go ahead and synchronize your product search data. So you publish it, synchronize your product search data, and your products and their pictures and all that good information show up in Enterprise Portal for people to see, filter, search, and put into their shopping cart in order to create their purchase requisition. All right, so that's the very shortened version of a procurement catalog. Now, in terms of controlling purchasing, now there are what's called those purchasing policies that allow you to define by category what users can do. And you can either define the policies for your whole company, or if you really need to define it on smaller groups of people within your company, you can create an organizational hierarchy which will allow you to set up different policies for different parts of your organization. So the organizational hierarchies are not, yes, clearly here under organizational admin, wrong one, sorry. Under organizational hierarchies. So I've got one that I've set up here called purchasing control. If I just go ahead and edit that. So what you actually build out here is an org chart looking structure. So I've got Contoso Entertainment, I've got a finance department, and I've got two groups under finance, procurement and administration. So I've gone ahead and created this and given it the purpose of procurement internal control. Now with organization hierarchies, you can assign a hierarchy to have multiple purposes. So I could make one that's an org chart and use it for my whole company, or I could use it for bits and pieces of the company. But so a hierarchy can have multiple purposes, but if you're going to go ahead and control purchasing by smaller groups, it's probably likely that you're going to just need one that's specific to purchasing control. You can see here there's different organization types allowed within this department, cost center, business unit. So you get a lot of flexibility at different levels of your company to set this up. So like I said, we've set this up so that only the procurement, administration, finance, IT, and project operations, people within these groups are able to do this, will be applied to the purchasing policy we're going to set up. So you set up your organizational hierarchy here in organization hierarchies, and then you go back to procurement and sourcing for the policy itself. All right, so configuring the purchasing policies is the next step, and we do that under procurement and sourcing. Policies over here, set up policies, purchasing policies. You can see I've got a bunch of inactive ones, but the procurement policy USMF is the one of interest. So you can see here on this one, organizationally, right now, it applies to the entire organization. And you see the hierarchy that's being used is one called companies. If I need it to apply just to that hierarchy we set up, I actually create a new policy, and I would select my purchasing control. So this is where I start pulling in the purchasing control hierarchies. So you can see here I've set up that hierarchy, and even within this, so you saw I had the finance group with 2 subgroups, IT and project operations. Now having defined this hierarchy, I can pick those specific parts of this hierarchy that I want this policy to apply to, right? So if you did this if you used your whole org chart, you can pick the little pieces of it that the policy applies to. So you can make any number of purchasing policies and select different parts of your organizational hierarchy to apply those policies to. So, perhaps this one would actually be named admin, finance, admin, and procurement. Right, so then you have a whole number of policies here applicable to different parts of your organization. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my other one just for purposes of the demonstration. Okay, so that first part, that's the first part of setting up your purchasing policies. Define who it applies to. Now there are only, for the purposes of this webinar, there are only a couple of these policies that are really applicable. The first one is if you've set up a catalog like we did, you need to define the catalog policy rule. Now this is just a basic one that just says effective this date, the date you create the policy, is the catalog that you're going to use. And without having set this up, you can't actually use the catalog in Enterprise Portal. It will give you an error. But you can see here, you can give it an expiration date. So if that catalog, you know that perhaps the prices or some information is due to expire at some point, you could go ahead and set an expiration date. I've just left mine without one. The other policy that's useful to set up, the category access policy rule. Now this is the key one for how you control purchasing around your organization. So if I go ahead and I open this up, you can see here our hierarchy that we should be all getting quite familiar with. So this, by putting the categories in the selected category section, that means that the organization that we selected here can purchase items or non-items even for these categories. So what that fundamentally means is that when we look at something either in the client or in Enterprise Portal, the users are going to be limited and have access to these items when they are making their purchase requisitions. And that manifests itself in Enterprise Portal such that you may see the crane rental category in Enterprise Portal because we said in our catalog that it was there and visible. We didn't deactivate it or anything. But if I haven't put it here and there were products under crane rental, you would see no products. So you might see this, but if the user hasn't been activated, if they're not part of the organization here and crane rentals with crane rental here, then they're not going to see any products. So they would see crane rental and it would be empty for them. All right, so your catalog, having set your catalog up, the users see all those bits and pieces that you have in your catalog, but only if they're, if they have these categories and they're part of that organization there, will they get to actually make those purchases. All right, and you can do it. It's easier to do it by, if it works for how you want to do it, of course, for your organization, you can include subcategories and just slap them over into this right-hand column without having to select them all individually. So for this organization, my USMF, I've got all the categories selected here to allow my users to purchase from any of these categories. All right, and you can see just by changing it or just by opening it and closing it instead of escaping, it actually retired the old rule and made a new rule. It's interesting in the policy section here, some of them require you to actually retire them and then create a new one. Others of them auto-retire and create based upon the fact that you open it and resave it. So if you try and edit a policy and you're finding that it's not letting you edit it, it's likely that you need to retire it first and then create a new one before you move on. And then thirdly, what we have is our category policy rule. So this is where you pick a category, and I'll pick kayaks, and this is where, we had assigned vendors to either approved or preferred. This is where I can limit the purchasing. So preferred or approved. Don't even allow vendor selection. Perhaps you want your purchasing department to select the vendors. You don't want it done at purchase requisition time by the user, or you can allow them to pick any vendor. Okay, so you've got all sorts of options there. This is where you would control whether users have to fill in that questionnaire prior to submitting their purchase requisition. So you do that, and they can't submit that purchase rec until that questionnaire is filled out. It's quite annoying. Then you've got category policy matching. So whatever your company policy might be, and you can set that up separately. So you got three-way matching to your, your PO, your invoice, and your receipts, and you've got just two-way matching, or if there's perhaps no matching at all, put three-way matching on here. The receiving requirements and the deduction requirements, they have to do with the, they have to do with how your system handles the receiving and deduction and how those things are posted, and whether you want to accrue them on the receipt or whether things are accrued at invoice time. Okay, so this is how some of that information is controlled that we set up within our hierarchy. Again, you don't have to use this. This can be all blank if you want, and then the users have full access to for example, to all those vendors. So without saying all vendors here, I will get all vendors even if I don't have it set up here. All right, so I'd only put a category in here and use this line if there was something within here I wanted to specifically control separately. All right, so I'm going to close that. That's how we set up our policies. Okay. And then posting profiles. If you want to control where where the money for the purchasing is going, you go by category. We're going to go ahead and do that under inventory management. So posting and posting. This gets a bit into the finance side of things. You can see under purchase order here, this is where we would set that up, the purchase order tab here. So you can see I can set up for all these different types of actions within the system: product receipt, inventory receipt, expenditure, all this sort of purchase accrual. You can actually define on a category basis if you wanted to. On a category basis, I could define for one of my categories, utilities for example, that any time a product receipt was made, that it was going to go to some sort of specific GL account here. All right, so I've seen companies who have a couple hundred categories, and every single category is defined in here with where the general ledger postings go based on category. So that's again an optional step if you want your GL postings to be driven by the category. All right, so that's the setup end-to-end of a procurement category and its hierarchy. Now, how do we go ahead and use that with a purchase requisition? A purchase requisition, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with these. You do have the ability to create them within the client or within employee services. You can create them for a project or non-project, depending on whether you use projects, you use the project management accounting module in your company. You can either purchase products that are in your system or use the procurement category. And if you've set the permissions up properly, again, that's something under the policies in procurement and sourcing, you can have people request purchases for others. So they can fill out a purchase requisition for multiple people within their organization. All purchase requisitions must go through workflow in order to be approved and move into being a purchase order. But you can set that up as simply as an auto approve, or you can make it as complex as a very complex structure that is based off of who they are in the organization, the price limits in the purchase requisition, and people's signature authority, and even have it do that on a PR line level. So it can either be evaluated at the PR or PR line level. And then, of course, you have purchasing policies for detailed purchase requisition control. So there's a little bit of setup here, another purchasing policy, your permissions, and your workflow. I'll just go over those relatively quickly here. Procurement and sourcing, back to our policies. So this is the purchase requisition control rule here. This is the policy you can set up. This was a useful one. This determines it only gives you these fields here, but for these fields you now have the capability to decide whether or not they are, and again, this is one I have to retire in order to be able to edit it, so show you those fields. So you can say for any of these given fields whether they're required, not required, or conditionally required. So I can specify certain things like if the vendor is a certain vendor, you have to put their unit price in, okay? Or potentially on reason, if the amount of the purchase requisition is over a certain amount, maybe you have to have somebody fill in a reason. So you can go ahead and set these fields as required, not required, or conditionally required, and when they go to submit the purchase requisition to workflow, if they're not filled in according to these rules, they will get an error to remind them to fill these in. Now within the released product, you have certain min, max, and multiple order restrictions set up in your default order settings for the product. Maybe you have to order things in boxes of 24 because that's how they come. So if you want to enforce those at the purchase requisition level when people are purchasing, you can tick these boxes, and if they're ordering 2 of something and the multiple is 24, it will bump the order up to 24. When you're raising a purchase requisition, there's 2 dates standard that show up on the creation screen, requested date and accounting date. A lot of companies go ahead and set them to be the same date so that the date that you requested is also in the system as accounting date. The 2 dates usually confuse people, and by having just 1 date when they're creating purchase requisitions, it makes life a little bit easier. And if you want to allow the user to have the goods delivered to a different address, because the address on the purchase requisition is nominally the company's business address that you've set up in the system, you can tick this and they can specify a different delivery address. Perhaps you want them to deliver direct to customer or something. Okay, so that's the purchase requisition control rule. So the other thing was purchase, go back to policies, with the permissions. This is where here you can set this up and allow people to go ahead and make purchases on behalf of somebody else. So if you, like Luke Lenhart here, you can see can raise a purchase requisition for himself, obviously, but also for Ted or Sarah. So this is where you would set that sort of thing up. And then we have the workflows here. Workflows are a whole nother animal as well, but you have a purchase requisition review workflow and a purchase requisition line review if you're using line-based approval. So the purchase requisition review would then call the line one, and of course you can have any number of sorts of conditional reviews and approvals within these to get the purchase requisition approved, or something as simple as an auto approve, just so long as you have a workflow that the PR goes through. Okay, well, I've already whizzed through all of that, purchase requisitions and the workflow. Yeah, and this is an interesting feature too in the workflow. If you are using projects within your system, there is the way to set the workflow up so that it can require the personnel who are defined within the project as project manager, controller, or sales manager to be involved in the review and approval process of those purchase requisitions. So that's very handy. So creating a purchase requisition, we'll go ahead and do this quickly in the client itself. Now, most users usually don't have the all purchase requisition menu item because that's usually restricted to people in the purchasing department. So most people will go into purchase requisitions prepared by me. I've got a handful I've got here myself. Simple process, new purchase requisition, you give it a name. Now, people's tendency is always to give it their name, but it really should be the name of the purchase requisition so that it helps you and the purchasing department, read this and understand a little bit about what the purchase requisition is. Because you'll see here in the grid list, the name shows up, and I already have my name here as preparer, so there's no point putting my name there. If you're buying against a project, you can select the default project for that purchase requisition as well. Right here, so this is the reason, like I said, if you can make that mandatory, conditionally mandatory if you want. We can add a line here. Now this is where, if I'm going to use the procurement category, see, I can go ahead and select the procurement category here, open up the hierarchy to what I want. I'll select computers, and this is where I can type in I want an HP blah 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 something with a big monitor. Okay, so this is how people can purchase things that are not items in your system, and go ahead and specify the information about the product. If I select the details, it opens up the details in the whole form here, and this is where, for example, if I said the user had to fill out a questionnaire, I would see it here. If I had the ability to put in a delivery address, I could do it here. I also have the ability, in the screen we were just looking at the line view, of course, I only had this little bit of text, but if the users can go in here and put in a whole bunch more text, maybe a URL to something that they've already found, and they can, of course, maybe attach a quote they have, all sorts of information you can put in this form to support your purchase requisition. Now, a lot of people pick close here at the bottom right, which that'll close the whole purchase rec, so it's important to close the line details there to take you back to the main form. Okay, so having put a line in, then I've got my submit button, and that's how I submit it to workflow, simple as that. Okay, so I'm going to just jump into Enterprise Portal because there's a lot of features here I wanted to show you with EP with a few minutes to spare. Let's see. Okay, so good. We'll do this in EP here. Okay, so over here on let me just go to my employee services. If somebody is a self-service user, this is employee services and what they see. So they want to order products, basically raise a purchase requisition. They go to order products. This is the screen that I've set up in my catalog to show up at the front of the catalog. If I open Office Machines and Computers, that was when we were messing with a lot. You remember? Remember I did a category page about justification. You see over here on the right, that's where my category page shows up. So that's where users see that. You see I've got a nice view here. So instead of just getting a drop-down list of products or having to select a procurement category, I actually get different products here with pictures if I've set them up in my released product. So it can be a lot easier for users ordering products, particularly if they're not super computer savvy. Now, having hit the hyperlink for the product, I get a whole bunch more information here. You can see this is where I get the attribute details that we set up for this keyboard. If I have those minimum, max, or order multiple settings, you see them here. And any sort of, you can also in your catalog set up related products. So you can do the kind of thing like you see generally like people who bought this also bought. So you would see here maybe a mouse that somebody generally bought when buying the keyboard. Close this. Here are the filters I set. Remember I had the different capacities and stuff, so quantity of 2 and below HDMI ports, I end up with 2. So this is where you get your HDMI, drive capacity, and those price range filters that we set up in our catalog. Really handy features there. And if I add something to my shopping cart, add to cart, if the product's configurable, I could have selected the, the color there, and then I've got, when I want to check out, I select my cart, and then I just do my checkout process. This is basically building the purchase requisition. So I've got my 2 items here. It's going to ask me to fill in a little bit more information. This is the stuff you see on the header of your purchase requisition. So I put in some sort of information here about my justification. Select a project if that's applicable. And then, well, I've failed to put something in here, so I'll just get rid of this one. And then I submit it, and it submits it off to workflow. So this is really handy, like I said, for users who don't have any other need to be in the client and you want them to be able to order goods or services. They can do that here within Enterprise Portal. All right, so this should just come back and tell me it's gone. See, it's been submitted, purchase requisition number, close. I can go to my orders here, and I can see the status of my orders within Enterprise Portal. All right. So that is purchase requisitions and catalog, category hierarchy in a nutshell. Do we have any questions? Let's see. Okay. So no questions. I wanted just to let you guys know there are some upcoming events that you can find us at if you're interested. There's a Lean Summit. We are experts in the Lean manufacturing capabilities, having actually written the code that is now part of AX2012. Microsoft bought that off of us a number of years ago. So we'll be there at the Lean Summit here in Atlanta in early May. There's also the AXUG Focus in Chicago and the Summit in Orlando, where we'll be making presentations at both of those events on various topics as well. Okay, we have a number of different webinars coming up. I've got one next week on using the projects module. If you're interested, there are on our website, I believe there are also, you can find the recordings of other webinars we've done. So if you're interested in the Procurement Catalog one, the recording should be out there, or keep an eye on our website. I'm sure I'll be doing it again in the not too distant future. So there's a number of different webinars you can check out on our ebecs.com/events. Or if you're interested in some sort of project audit, you want to have us review your project and maybe evaluate how that's going along and see if we can provide new services, or proof of concept for an upgrade. We do a very clearly defined proof of concept that comes out with a set of recommendations and a statement of work for how we would proceed with an actual upgrade event. And if you'd like us to look at your whole supply chain and provide recommendations and particularly attack any areas that you think are troublesome, we're happy to do that as well. So thank you all for attending, and if you have any questions that you think of afterwards, feel free, this is my email address, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Have a nice rest of your day, and hope to see you again on our webinar in the future.